Papers. Publishers of the Greenwich Post, New Canaan Advertiser, the Darien Times, the Ridgefield Press, the Weston Forum, the Wilton Bulletin, the Reading Pilot, the Lewisboro Ledger, the Monroe Courier, the Eastern Courier, the Trumbull Times, Fairfield Sun, Shelton Herald, the Stratford Star, the Milford Mirror, and the Valley Gazette.
Hersom Acorn and HANradio.com. The leader in local news, sports, arts, and entertainment in southwestern Connecticut.
Good morning, friends. We're back at 1000 Bridgeport Ave in Shelton. It was kind of a really crazy summer. We were all over different locations. Glad to be back in. Also glad to be on location. The Daily Drive is intelligent, motivational talk with a little humor, bringing real life situations, problems, and solutions to our listeners. I'm so proud to be a part of the Hersom Acorn team, and our team here is just fabulous, as I always say. And we're Fridays at 10 o'clock, and then you can find us again on YouTube and hanradio.com. So I'm so honored today to have a very special friend with me who does such great community service work. And the Daily Drive, as you know, is about moving everybody down the court. How you fuel your mind, your body, your spirit creates the life you live. And whether you're in a good place or not a good place, hopefully the Daily Drive gives you something to walk away with that inspires you not only to make a change in your life, but to help others make a change. So today we are honoring our friend Deborah Greenwood from the Center for Family Justice. Let me get it correct because everyone always busts my chops when I get the names wrong, but it's with good intention. And I had the pleasure of meeting Deborah at Rose Shala's festivities event I think we were at Lily in August. Mm-hmm. And I was mesmerized, if you got my newsletter, about the great service work you do. And you've done it for so many years, and you're so incredibly youthful. The two don't really match, but okay, we'll go with that.
I'll take that. Thank you.
And I want to talk to you about how you got into public service before we jump over to what you're doing for the Center for Family Justice. I want to talk about you and how you've been so motivated to be in public service for so long with so many awards and do so many great things for people. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Thank you, Denise. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here this morning.
You're very welcome.
It is an honor to be able to share with everyone listening this morning, especially you, who's been very inspirational to me as well. We always go back to our roots, and I grew up in an incredibly wonderful family environment. And public service and volunteerism really came from, mom and dad, but primarily my father. My dad really was very proud to be able to say to people, he only had an 8th grade education. He came here as an Italian immigrant and was the oldest of a family of 7.
Wow, I didn't know you were Italian.
Yes,
interesting.
Yeah, and you learn and watch as a child, and had one older sibling who was an incredible athlete, a baseball and basketball star in the Bridgeport area, and I grew up in Stratford, Connecticut. My father, working very hard to provide for family, always in education being important because it was something he couldn't do, helping his family, so he had to quit school at an early age, but he always loved baseball. So the short version is, as we grew, with a 7-year difference between my brother and I, he wanted to volunteer and help kids. It was always about helping kids. So he got involved with Pal Pony League, which is a 13 and 14-year-old age bracket of young boys that were learning how to play athletics. And it was more than baseball. So my mother worked the shift of 3 to 11 at General Electric in those days. Again, working hard to individuals. So my dad was my daycare person. So I got to go to the baseball field every day after school, and I paid attention after doing my homework because that was important. And my dad would make all the kids on his baseball team as a volunteer coach say, "Did you get your homework done?" And you had kids from projects, you had kids from middle class. So he would talk about being a good person, and he took this baseball team 3 times to the World Series.
Wow.
So here you have someone who was also helping coach with principals of schools, a former superintendent, and yet everyone turned their eyes to my dad. Morning, noon, and night, we would collect money so they could go on these trips. I watched and paid attention in the impact he had. So when he passed away 8 years ago, I remember and he was 89, he had a lovely life. He basically had me help write his eulogy, and he said, please let everyone know the following. I didn't have a lot of money, but he said, the one thing I did have was a very full, rich life, wonderful family, enough food on the table, and I think I made a difference in a lot of young people's lives.
Geez, I'm almost ready to cry over here.
So the line wrapped around the funeral parlor, and there were so many young men in their 60s that said, I wanted to pay my respects to Coach. Here was just my dad, very humble man.
Regular Joe.
Regular Joe. They wanted to name a field in Stratford, Connecticut after him. He said, no thanks. He said, they gave him a watch, and he said, I'll take the watch, but don't change the name. This should be for other people besides me.
Oh.
So that's what's inspired me to move forward, to get a college education.
Well, you've got a few of them.
I have a few. And my dad actually, we only had one car, dropped me off in front of Sacred Heart University when I said I wanted to go on. My brother was able to pick and choose almost any Ivy League school because of his athletic background. He was an all-state pitcher in Connecticut, so he had scouts and recruiters going after him. My dad, it was nothing bad in those days to say, oh, you're a girl. You're an Italian girl. You just meet a nice guy and have babies.
I think we had the same conversation, right? My parents like, you don't need to go to college. Just marry the guy down the street. That's what we do.
Exactly. And I ended up meeting my husband at college, actually, my first year at Sacred Heart University. And 42 years later, here we are.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a whole nother show.
Yeah,
where we're going to
right.
talk about how the longevity of marriage and how to keep it going.
There you go.
So now you spent a great deal of time at the YMCA.
I did.
We can talk about that for a little bit. Where you really, we know the YMCA's position is, and their mission is to change lives through empowerment. And that's sort of the resounding theme of your entire background. And there's some important things I want to talk to you about, and just probably after the break, getting into domestic violence. But tell me about the why, because we're using the why as a place to set foundations for kids that might not have them, right?
Absolutely.
And what did you do there?
So I started with, we're still going to school at night. I worked my way through college, got married at the age of 20.
Oh, young.
And my dad said to my husband, okay, now it's your problem on how to figure out where to find the money. She's all yours. I love you, but. So, you're going to sink or swim. So I ended up working my way through college. So I got to take some night classes and day classes, worked at Sacred Heart University, but always had a great passion and interest for exercise. I'll date myself back in the 80s when the old Jane Fonda came out.
Oh, yeah, Jazzercise and all those, the videos, we did those in college on the, the dorm floors, right? And we pig pile out there to do Jane.
Exactly. It was the same thing. So something called Aerobics in Motion became the first national YMCA aerobic program where you had to pass run times, you had to wear uniforms with your Y shirts, certain colors. It was either red, white, or blue with a white T-shirt and so forth. And so there was a lot of credentials you had to go through. So one thing led to another, and then I found out that I could actually be picked, if I was good at it, to volunteer for free in the back of the class when people would turn. So one thing led to another. I was asked to learn how to become an instructor and so forth. And I remember how excited I was because I was a young mom with 3 beautiful little girls and my husband self-employed. And I thought, guess what? They want to pay me $8 a class to teach right down the street at an old firehouse that the YMCA was renting. And that began my career. And one thing led to another. My education was being supported by the YMCA. In those days, again, predominantly being run by men. But you took your passion, and I also realized in those days, and of course now we know that youth fitness is important, looking at type 2 diabetes, on children was also something I was very passionate about, working with kids and youth. Same idea. Got that bug from my dad from being a child and how I could change lives. So we started youth fitness classes. We had a great big camp that still exists up on Route 59 in Monroe called Camp Teepee.
Wow, congratulations.
And then before you knew it, as I'm continuing my education, I interviewed for a full-time program director's job. And I'm not ashamed to say that when I was offered $19,000 with benefits, I went, oh my gosh, how incredibly wonderful. And that's how it all started.
Isn't that something? So oftentimes when we're pursuing our goals or we're making changes, we come across, bumps in the road, I like to call them. And sometimes that'll take people completely off road. They'll either be squeamish and hold back. They might, give up their plans. And I know we've all experienced that. So in and along our interview or talk, I want you to tell people, like, when you came up, what would be an example of when you came up on something like that? I'm going to call it a roadblock, whether it be you were a woman, you were a mom, you were crazy busy, your husband said no, your parents are like, why do you want to do that? And we all still have those things to this day. Somebody that's kind of dealing with that now, how would you tell them through your experience you got through?
That's a great question, Denise. There were many, many obstacles and many bumps, and it always goes back to how we manage that. Some of them, I'd say 50% I managed well, and 50% I did not manage well. My fuse.
That's an honest answer, and I have to agree. I probably in the same bracket with you.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said otherwise. People would say, well, I'll shut this off and find a new station right now. But as a woman in a YMCA, again, it was the Young Men's Christian Association, I wanted to work harder, prove that my educational background could put together curriculum to help kids in physical education environments, that we can get more inclusive with a background in special education as well. So came up with an idea to just start putting together a program with staff, being a very inclusive person. Actually, many of my staff, where I started my career at the Lakewood Trumbull YMCA, which serves Monroe and Trumbull, were neighbors of mine.
Oh.
Stay-at-home moms that decided this might be an opportunity for them, who had some education they never got to utilize, putting together trainings to say, how are we going to get kids that have different, varied special needs to be integrated into a regular physical education program at the YMCA. And we started at Camp Teepee doing that. Then we started doing offerings at the Y to the community. They were very well accepted. What we were teaching was a lot more than how to utilize equipment. It was really more about kids that were non-disabled, being not afraid of kids with special needs, and kids with special needs that were feeling good about themselves and what they could do. So we'd evaluate, we'd document, do reports. One thing leads to another. Our school system in Monroe was very interested in our program, which was called Movement with a Purpose. So I was allowed to come in with YMCA staff and do that with pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade students. And we put together this program that used simple equipment that the Y built, and my husband, being a contractor, actually helped do some of the building. We always go to our best friend and say, can you help me? And so we provided that for the Monroe Public Schools. And for many years, it caught on to other towns. What was the neatest thing about it, it wasn't that we were teaching directionality skills of training eyes how to read. It was improving and enhancing their ability to even add the old-fashioned way. Of course, the curriculums have changed. But back in the 80s and into the early 90s, this was very important work.
Yes, it was.
And, kids with disabilities were just starting to get mainstreamed into the public sector of schools. So
you speak so eloquently, and you have your passion so well paved. Did you ever get a big fat no that kind of irritated you?
All the time.
And what'd you do to get around it?
So you would give it enough time. My enough time would be 2 to 3 days.
Oh, you beat me there. I'm like 2 to 3 hours. Why isn't it done?
There you go. Exactly.
I'm coming in.
So you just try to find someone else that might have a good heart that was attached to their head and 2 ears that really got what you were trying to do.
So what I hear is it didn't stop you. It didn't get you down. You didn't take it personally. You didn't hold a grudge. You just found an alternative.
You did.
So our show last week was talking about plans thwarted. And we had my brother, who's a football coach, on, and Roberto Clemente Jr. come on, and their common denominator in their conversation was, you have to adjust. And it's a series of comebacks. And it's so interesting how this is kind of falling in on that too. And I think that my grandmother used to say, similar to your dad, when you make other people a success, you're a success. And not until then. So it's a little bit past break time. We're going to take a quick break. Friends, if you want to call in today, even though we're audio right now, please feel free to do so at 203-442-9055. Join the conversation. We're going to get into some slightly heavier stuff after this. Thanks so much. It's The Drive with Denise DiGrigoli and my friend Deborah Greenwood. We'll be right back.
Breaks, sprains, injuries, and pain can now be quickly and expertly treated at Coastal Ortho Express in Norwalk. Why wait hours in the ER? Save a trip and save money going straight to an orthopedic specialist at Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care, 203-845-2070. No appointment necessary. Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care, open Monday through Saturday in the iPark building at 761 Main Avenue in Norwalk, or call 203-845-2070. Fast!
Healthy, confident smiles begin at Stratford Orthodontics. Conveniently located on Main Street, we are Stratford's hometown orthodontist. We offer the latest in orthodontic technology, including Damon braces and Invisalign. We always accept new patients. Call today to schedule a complimentary consultation. 203-375-8332. Stratford Orthodontics, 2499 Main Street, Stratford. 203-375-8332 and online at stratfordsmile.com.
Alliance. We are an industry leader in coordinating transportation for large events such as corporate road shows, conferences, and special events. Our team of experts understands the dynamics and logistics of high-pressure situations and complex arrangements, all within a rapidly changing environment. Since 1999, we have added charter jets, event management, and personal protection to our range of services. Mention this ad for $25 off your next round-trip reservation. Alliance and you. Together, we can achieve the extraordinary. 855-546-6996 or alliancelimo.com.
A variety of food trucks, hands-on activities, live music, a different theme every night, plus top women's tennis. It's the 2015 Connecticut Open presented by United Technologies. Be there as some of the world's best competed at the largest pro tennis event in New England. And catch famous players John McEnroe, James Blake, and more in the men's Legends event presented by PowerShares Series. It all adds up to one legendary week, August 21st through the 29th at the Connecticut Tennis Center in New Haven. Get your tickets at ctopen.org.
Hersom Acorn and HANradio.com.
Get your camera. Okay. Welcome back to The Drive. We're here with Deborah Greenwood of the Center for Family Justice. Can you give us the website?
I can. Our website is www.centerforfamilyjustice.org.
Okay. So I did a little research about domestic violence. And we all think that we know a lot about domestic violence, but the reality is we don't. And I think what happens is, what we've known and learned is it's all incomes, it's all sexual orientations, it's all ages, and yes, men get abused too. You think it's only women, and you think it's only poor women, and that's so far from the truth.
That's correct.
And it's like, and I don't know why it's become like an under the cover conversation. Because it's embarrassing, I guess.
Yes.
Because, and like when you see someone like a football star beat up his girlfriend and then she turns around and marries him, what is that saying to the public? So there's a whole lot of complexity here that goes on.
Yes.
So you've been there, 2 years?
No, I've actually been with the center. I just had my 9th year anniversary.
Oh, how did I think it was 2?
That's okay.
I apologize.
No,
All right.
it's fine.
Well, see, this is the thing. We don't, unless I met Deborah by accident or not by accident, and I always thought I knew, and I've actually been on boards where we've donated to various domestic crisis centers, and you hear kind of the statistics, but you never really know until someone tells the story.
Right.
So tell the story. It's pretty crazy.
It really is. When I left my YMCA career for some personal reasons, but professionally as well, most importantly, I was reevaluating where I was later in life. And what we saw at the Y consistently through kids in after-school programs and kids in day camp, now you're talking voluminous numbers. And parents, of course, that come with those children, is that they start to talk to you when they talk about, but please don't tell anyone.
Oh.
So where do you get help? And I remember,
Meaning the kids are telling you this.
the kids are saying it, and
that's
obviously we are mandated reporters. If it became physical or sexual abuse, we would have to tell someone. And working with DCF and law enforcement are two of our key pieces. But most importantly, beyond that, is trying to help the victim, which in 89% of the cases is the mother or the woman of all ages. And you were talking to moms from significant wealth, and they were afraid to change their lifestyle. What would happen to my children? They were being threatened behind closed doors in the picket white fence. You're also talking to parents that are coming from housing projects. So this crosses all socioeconomic backgrounds. It covers anyone from any race, any religion. I've been there 9 years now and doing these statistics year after year. It's divided in threes. People will say, isn't it more prevalent in this community or that community or the Latino community or African American community? And the answer is absolutely not. It does cross all boundaries. And victims are ashamed, and you use the word embarrassed, ashamed and embarrassed to be able to confide and leave. The hardest thing for a victim of abuse to do, including someone who's been sexually assaulted, which goes hand in hand. We do both. So what happens to those kids growing up in those homes, many times as they're considered a secondary victim.
Yeah, of course.
Watching it, hearing
Role modeling it.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
not great.
Many times also become the primary victim.
Ooh.
Now we're talking
So it flows
about family.
down from the leadership.
Exactly right.
Or so-called leadership.
That's correct. And many times people feel it's just a black eye and that's domestic violence. And the answer to that is no, that's a myth. We're talking about people who are being not just physically abused. Some may have 20, 30, or 5 or 10 years of emotional and verbal abuse. Their self-esteem is being ripped apart, which leads to so many other
So then they don't even
avenues.
want to get a job or further education because their self-esteem is in the dumpster.
That's exactly right.
And so it kind of is like, the hamster wheel. It just keeps proliferating throughout the entire family and the cycle. And so how is the center, and I know you are really, and my newsletter said, working to bring a tribe of resources so that people get the full circle, because it is I think most problems that we talk about here on the drive or situations, everything's full circle.
Right.
One informs the other. So how do you, first of all, get them in?
Right.
And then get them in that circle or tribe of resources. Because I'm sure you have quite a bit of a fallout rate as well.
We do. And the most important thing we can do is something like we're doing this morning, being able to go on the airwaves, being able to get print in the newspapers. The media is so important besides the events we do. It really is. The impact, someone is listening this morning saying, I didn't even know there was a place I could go that had free and confidential resources for me. They can call a 24/7 hotline any day of the week, 365 days a year. It could be a friend, a mother, a sister, a cousin, a brother, or someone that knows someone that can also call that hotline to say, I have a friend. Now, we can't call that friend or sister or mother, whomever. We can encourage and help get them through our doors or to make that call. Once they walk through the door to speak to one of our counselors, they have begun their journey to healing and safety.
Right, because I read on the internet, it's also like the victim is restricted money, restricted access to their family, restricted access to their friends, not only told that they're wrong and dumb and not worthy, and all these things. I call it drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Because
That's right.
somewhere along the line, you've drank the Kool-Aid and you've bought into it.
That's correct.
So for me, I think if I was a victim, the hardest thing for me would be to say, no, you're wrong. Like, where does the healing begin? Like, where do you give someone the chutzpah to say, I can say no, they're wrong. I can be okay with the fact that I'm not going to have, because a lot of these, I remember when I was involved in one of the professional network groups, South County. We used to give to an organization in Norwalk. I forget the name. And I remember one of the profiles of the women that came to receive, and she was coming from an extremely wealthy background, like over-the-top wealth. And one of her biggest fears was losing the lifestyle, like you said, taking her kids out of private school, so, whatever they would be losing, and of course, whatever her monthly stipend was to shop. So how do you get someone to see, like, is shop, and all of this sort of front outlay of accolades worth it when you are really, like, borderline suicidal? Like, where do you turn that switch for them?
What'll happen many times, and we've seen it in the news, we've seen it right here in Connecticut, right in our own backyards, when that victim, we're going to say she right now because, again,
it's the majority.
It's the majority, will say, I've had enough. And when they haven't been working with a domestic violence agency like ours, and there are 18 domestic violence agencies in the state of Connecticut.
Oh, good.
So we work through the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which is located in Wethersfield. And we talk about all these topics. What's the best venue? How do we communicate? How do we get to people and convince them it's time to start working with us? When they might be serving those divorce papers, and I've had enough, is when that victim is at their highest risk.
Yeah.
And it's an emotional, as you can only imagine, piece where something goes very, very wrong if they've not had the help and support of an agency like ours.
Right.
So that's what we looked at is, what else does a victim of abuse need? I shouldn't have to tell them, here's what I know you need. They need to tell us what they need. And that's how, in the last 5 years, and we've been around since 1895. We're a former YWCA. Then we were the Center for Women and Families.
1895?
1895.
So this has been a problem in our society, hundreds of years, essentially.
Hundreds of years, exactly. And now that we're having conversations like we are this morning, and we're seeing in the media, people are talking about it, college campuses, sexual assault, teen dating, violence, bullying, and all that is abuse. So what we're finding now is we studied who has the best potential model with bringing zero homicide. How do we end this? How do we break those cycles? So we found that something called a family justice center, which brings under one roof all the resources that victims who have been part of focus groups, thousands and thousands across the country and now in 8 other countries, have found. It's an incredible movement. And Connecticut currently does not have one until we cut our ribbon January 1st of 2016. Is to bring law enforcement into the building, to bring all the legal services, someone that does have resources, but it might be his attorney. So where do they find the money to get the right representation when they go into court?
Right.
So we're talking about assets, not losing their lifestyle, not losing their home, bank accounts that have been frozen. What do we do to help you get to where you need to have an abuse-free, self-sufficient life to move forward, and so that they can make that phone call if they're coming from a 5,000 square foot house or they're coming from a 500 square foot rented apartment. We can now
give them a sense of dignity,
yes,
integrity, and give them sort of their original selves back, at least to start remolding.
Exactly.
Now, how many people do you serve at one time?
Every year, our statistics will go between 4,600 to 5,000 domestic violence clients that we serve annually.
And then you're pulling from our tri-state area or just Fairfield County?
Just Eastern Fairfield County, which includes, we're located in Bridgeport, but have satellite offices in the town of Trumbull, Monroe, Fairfield, and Stratford. We also serve the town of Easton. So those are our 6 towns. However, when I mentioned 18 domestic violence agencies in Connecticut, many times people from other towns included in that number will feel safer coming to one of our other locations because it goes back to, I don't feel safe. Say I live in Stamford.
Right.
I don't want to be seen. I don't want my friends to see. I'm ashamed.
Yeah.
Their victims blame themselves. They have nothing to blame. No one should accept abuse, but that's how victims feel if you ask them.
Yeah, I deserve it.
Right, exactly.
I deserve it. I brought it on.
I did it. What did I do wrong?
What can I do better?
And same with people that live in our service area. They have the ability to either go to the New Haven office or someone in Stamford or someone even in Hartford. It's really the choice of a victim, and that's what empowers them to be able, and I think that's a key word, to empower and own that they can control this with a lot of help with experts.
What do you think the biggest success story is you can tell us to date in your particular center? Like, what can you tell us about somebody? I know you can't give names or anything,
Right.
but give us a story.
There are several, but one that jumps out to myself is someone that was emotionally, verbally, and then it turned physical after 15 years of
Wow.
marriage and raising 3 children. She felt worthless until she lost a few teeth with a broken arm. Still, I thought she still loved this man, and
Wow.
that's what it comes down to. They love that person. At the end of the day, she got our help. The time goes by. She, a year ago, ended up getting her master's
Wow.
in social work, and she's now an employee.
Now, that is a fabulous story. And on that, we're going to take a really quick break. We're going to end on a positive note. Anyone that wants to chime in with a question, you can find me on Twitter at Denise DiGrigoli. You can also call the station 203-442-9055. We're here with Deborah Greenwood with the Center for Family Justice, and we're learning about how to prevent and not only prevent, but get through a domestic violence situation. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Did you know that taking dance lessons is a great date night idea? Arthur Murray Grand Ballroom of Greenwich is a fabulous place to learn to dance and meet new people. Located at 6 Lewis Street, our studio is staffed with professional instructors ready to teach you salsa, waltz, rumba, hustle, tango. There's a dance for every season. And we are rated #1 on the knot.com. We are the wedding dance specialists. Take advantage of our new student offer, only $49. Call 203-769-1800. Visit us online at arthurmurraygreenwich.com.
It's grilling season, and Walter Stewart's Market is your local destination for the finest grill-ready certified Angus beef strip steaks, skirt steaks, 100% grass-fed ribeyes, all-natural pork ribs, Arthur Ave-style kebabs, fresh-cut veggies, delicious grab-and-go salads, chilled rosé wine, and ice-cold craft brews right next door. Walter Stewart's, your fresh local market. 229 Elm Street, New Canaan, and shop online for groceries and wine delivered to your door at stewartsmarket.com.
August means tennis in Connecticut, and the top players are going to be at the Connecticut Open, presented by United Technologies. Live music, food trucks, plus the superstars of women's tennis and the Men's Legends event, presented by the Power Shares Series, August 21st through the 29th. Get your tickets at ctopen.org.
Does advertising on HANradio.com work? Just ask Coastal Orthopedics. They ran spots with us, and within 24 hours, they had 21 walk-ins and 8 calls to their new immediate care center. To advertise on HANradio.com, call 203-417-5199 and ask for Marianne Hersom.
You're listening to Hersom Acorn Radio.
We're back with The Drive. Denise DiGrigoli. We're here Fridays talking about intelligent conversations with a little wit and humor, and my friend Deborah Greenwood is in from the Center for Family Justice. You know, the Daily Drive and the method is all about preventative mindfulness, steering your thoughts, therefore steering your actions, therefore creating your life. So maybe that method isn't necessarily for everybody, but I know for a fact it works, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a huge movement in our country for preventative everything, right?
Correct.
Let's eat healthy, let's exercise, let's prevent obesity and disease before it happens. We're even more and more so, unfortunately, through all these firestorms in our schools, looking at mental health a little differently.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And again, moving the ball down the court is no easy feat for any of us that enjoy public service. I'm sure it has its moments of greatness and then frustration. I would want to know from you, how do you change that cycle? How do you prevent that? My gut would be you have to start with the kids, because the leadership, as much as they love their kids, the parents, the whomever's involved, obviously might not be doing it great if the domestic violence is already set in, or the sexual abuse, or whatever type of abuse we're talking about today. I mean, abuse is abuse, verbal, physical, sexual. So you must be doing something with the children, especially with your background at the Y. Tell me what's going on there.
Thank you. Yes, and that's what led me to this agency, and I was fortunate enough and honored to become the CEO there. And it goes back to working with children at a very early age. We talked about the primary and secondary victims of children under the age of 18 years old, and our agency is an accredited National Children's Alliance. There are 9 in Connecticut. And we do the forensic interviews, which means kids that...
Ooh, that sounds serious.
It is. And we work with law enforcement and DCF running this program at the center to interview kids. So they only have to tell their story one time.
Oh, good.
And again, mandated reporters as teachers and camp counselors and so forth. So we have an opportunity to talk and educate the educators, whether it's school teachers, PTAs, camp counselors during the summer, pre-summer camp.
Right.
How do you, and what should you look for in kids? What are some reactions that kids might have where they shut down or are quiet? Is something going on? Maybe they're just shy. That could be one of them. And we don't always tell them not every person is a cookie cutter.
Right.
So when we go into classrooms, and we have an incredible prevention education department of
within your center?
Within our center.
Okay.
And we have 3 highly trained individuals. We're hoping to expand that. That is definitely one of our highest priorities once we get the Justice Center open this January, is we're going and talking to all of our superintendents in our schools, and we've been doing and increasing those numbers with a staff of 3, cross-training staff, utilizing fabulous volunteers that we train to go in and talk about what does a healthy relationship look like? What's acceptable behavior?
Isn't that interesting? Because we all think we know what one looks like based on what we've been taught.
That's right. Exactly. And it's incredible, as we know, when you talk to kids, what they will disclose. And
Scary.
what they might tell you after the educator, and we have both a male and female educator, so that let's talk about the young boys that are in these classroom settings feeling originally a few years back, oh gosh, it's always going to be me and I'm going to be the perpetrator. I'm going to get the blame for possibly doing something. And that's not always the case.
Yeah.
So how do we work together so that no is no, and how we can be not just mandated reporters and not snitches, we talk about that, but how can you be an ambassador even in first grade or kindergarten when someone is picking on someone, when someone is putting their hands on someone, when someone is bullying. I hate that word, but it is a word that people understand. That you actually should go to an adult. Who is that adult you trust that you can tell?
Now, I have a question on the bullying as a side note. Now, so we all grew up and we were picked on in the, on the playground, right?
Right.
Whatever, you had the floods on, you were a little chubby, your hair was funky, and that was just deemed traditional kind of, children picking on.
Right.
And I sometimes think, that's kind of part of growing up, right? Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I wonder, how does someone like you delineate in your training, that crossed the line to bullying? Right. Because I think you have it both ways, where it's legitimate bullying, but then you have some other parent that might be a little overcautious or having other things going on in their lives, so they make this more dramatic than it really is. It escalates into something else, and that also hurts the child's self-esteem.
Right.
Because
absolutely.
now they don't have a solid basis. So what do we do about that?
We talk about, especially at the PTA meetings and even with the kids in the classroom, and we actually start as young as preschool all the way to college campuses and have age-appropriate curriculum. We talk about, did it happen, was it isolated just the one time? Maybe that child said something to the other child that we didn't know about on the recess ground, and so they were defending themselves.
Right.
But we talk about consistent behavior, someone that is consistently picking on them, and it's not just an isolated incident. It's not 1, 2, or 3 times. We're doing this repeatedly. The schools have zero tolerance policies, how laws change. And part of what an agency like ours does is to advocate to change those laws, work with professionals in the school-based system, work with PTAs, work with what is it you would like to see? What can we do? And talking to our voted-in officials. Do you have legislators that are willing to stand up in Hartford and say, we've had enough of this? And we've seen that happen on our college campuses this past year with new legislation that says no is no.
Right, because in the same way, in the old days, it would be, well, the girl asked for it.
Correct.
She was out drinking and partying, and
Right.
she asked for it.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Or in the same way, like, even if you have a disgruntled argument with your spouse. I mean,
Right.
I work with my spouse, so I say we haven't been married 18 years. It's more like 36. On occasion, the fur flies.
Of course it does.
I don't put that in like the bad category,
No.
but you could. And I say to Ava, our daughter, it's about conflict and resolution.
Bingo.
It's okay that you argue once in a while. I think that's a healthy part of life.
That's right.
But I think in the wrong eyes, we're very vibrant Italian Americans. It could be like, wow, she's really yelling.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's right.
So then you could have the wrong neighbor be like, oh my God, let me call Deborah.
Right, exactly, and that does happen.
She
many
needs to
times.
intervene at Denise's.
Exactly, and one day when we do have that show about how do you exist 42 years, you're right. There's a lot of passion and there's noise, and but that doesn't mean that there can't be a conflict and how we agree to disagree. So part of the educational piece in the classroom is exactly what you're talking about, Denise, and getting the kids to have that aha moment. Oh, I get it. Okay.
Okay.
So that's important, and as well as the parents. We always will say that the kids are really very open to conversations, especially if you want to get some really honest feedback. Go to a kindergarten class, you learn more than you asked for. All kinds of things. So, and they kind of get off the beaten path. And I think that, when we're done, and you ask the kids, so tell me again, so identify a bully. And primary prevention looks like this. We don't just go in once. A primary prevention could be minimally 3 times with the same group of kids.
Okay.
And primarily 10 to 12 is even the best. So we try to make sure we're giving quality versus quantity when we do education and healthy relationship work. So a reason why we're trying to build our prevention department, because what we found, there's something called the ACE study. And what that does is a children's study that asks 10 questions. Did you grow up in a household where there was domestic violence? Did you grow up in a household where mom or dad went to prison? Drugs or alcohol was used? And if you answer more than 5 out of the 10 questions, we realized that there might be a possibility that this cycle will be repeated by that child.
So the scorecard indicates the possible.
Right. So there's a lot of study being done over the last 2 decades. And through the National Alliance for Hope, which was originally the National Family Justice Center Alliance, we're using this work as well at the Center for Family Justice with our kids programs to find out how we can change the outcome of when they grow up and they do have that relationship as an adult, to have hope indicators. What is it that child needs? And we're learning this from Casey Gwynn, who is the president and co-founder of the Center for Family Justice, now the National Alliance for Hope, with a man by the name of Dr. Vincent Folletti. And you're keep tuned to that, because we're trying to change the outcome, and that's a big directive of what's going to happen as well in the city of Bridgeport with fabulous leadership that we have with the new superintendent, Dr. Fran Rabinowitz, is as a former teacher. How can we get these kids, because we know if we can change the outcome, we're going to take 46 to 52% of kids in Bridgeport that drop out of high school, that's a big number, to at least graduate high school and maybe continue to move on.
And therefore making us a better place to live, a better country. Right. I know that sometimes even Ava will come home and you see some of the training that she receives at school. And, we might be in some sort of a verbal scuttle, right? And she will come out with some pearl of wisdom that will just drop me to my knees. I'll be like, what? Did you really just say that? Okay. So you're an old soul, you're actually listening in school, or maybe I should be listening. So it works the reverse. Like once we start to educate the kids, hopefully they'll get into maybe the parent that is abused and say something worthy that will send that aha moment to the parent that will actually precipitate that call. Now, I don't want to go to break just yet, guys. Give me one more second. Tell me about, I was a creative life mentor for the sophomores at Fairfield U for a while, a volunteer position. And that leadership role is guided by Dr. Joe DeFeo, to help people evaluate if they're doing the right things, you know, spending all that money, and are they on the right path, career path, and very reflective, and it's a whole semester. And oftentimes, for the female students, I notice more so, they do get disheveled on where they belong with their sexuality and what's appropriate and what isn't, and so on. So what can we say to, because we have such a huge college community here in this part of Connecticut where we live, or to any young lady about prevented, what's right, what's wrong, and what not to be ashamed of should it happen to you?
Right. I think that those are great words, Denise. We did training, and we'll be doing that again this September, to over 1,000 Fairfield University students. And we're working with Sacred Heart and UB and Housatonic as well.
Good.
And basically, laws changed. Now, universities across the United States know they're mandated to make sure they're working with an agency like ours. This is not a sort of kind of, you must be able to say to that young lady who might have encountered a sexual assault at a fraternity party or made a bad decision, and they blame themselves.
It happens a lot.
All the time. And I have 3 adult daughters, and they all went to college. And I remember going through it as a parent, having that phone call at 1:30 in the morning. And this is years and years ago, where you would make that call as a parent, and there was just nothing being done. Now, as we've moved forward, we say to those young ladies, you would go to your student response team, you would be encouraged to talk to them and report it.
Yes.
And go with your friend that you trust, or go alone. But most importantly, know that your rights are being protected, that you will also be referred and given free confidential services by an agency like ours that can say you did nothing wrong.
I had a friend that unfortunately was not sexually assaulted, but almost, and narrowly escaped, but never really got the proper help, and suffers from post-traumatic stress.
Correct. PTSD.
And you think that goes away
It
a
does
few
not.
months? Actually, it gets worse.
Right.
It gets a lot worse.
Yes, it does.
And so, 10 years after the fact now, the person, I don't think, realizes how that genetically reset them.
Right.
And now living out of that basket of fear is just horrible to watch. So I will certainly be helping you get that word out as well, because I know how critical that is firsthand.
It never goes away without the right help. You're absolutely right.
So we're having a lot of fun, and we're going to bring it home in about 1 minute. We'll be right back. Thanks for calling in, 203-442-9055. We're learning more about domestic violence and how to prevent it and what we can do if, unfortunately, it happened to you. Thanks so much, Deborah.
Kycote Rockefeller Estate is Westchester County.